Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
And just like magic, we're dressed the same exact way, but it's a week later. I don't know.
A week later. Wow.
Welcome again to Resilience Development in Action to Dr. Stacey Raymond. We talked about EMDR the last episode, but I want to focus on something that's meant a lot to me too. And I see that it means a lot to you too. So that's why I'm excited about this too. We're going to talk about your book, Helping the Helpers, particularly. I think that's very helpful for therapists to look at.
Right. I should probably show it, right? Yeah. There it is, Helping the Helpers. And it's co-authored with David Dashinger. He's a retired fire lieutenant. And there's Bonnie Rumley. And she has been an EMT since the age of 17. So she did it for most of her life, but she's a clinical social worker now. So the three of us put this together based on what we called the master class series, where we interviewed clinicians working with various branches of public safety. And we have a podcast as well called Responder Resilience.
Well, I'd love to be on there too, but I was going to joke around. So she drove the ambulance. That's great. Just tell her to write to me. We'll figure it out. You know, I'm joking. But no, I think that's exactly where my passion is also about. It's like, I love working with my first responder people. But I think it's important to understand that for me, I really think that we need to start at the academy level. And when they come in, you know, when you train a paramedic, EMT, police, law enforcement official of any kind, I think that starting about, you know, I think that now in Massachusetts, we do a whole 24 to 40 hours, depending on which academy, to talk about mental health. On a 6-month level, that's a drop in the bucket at best for something that you're going to deal with pretty much daily. But what can we do to get people trained on this? Because I think to me, it's so important to get to that point.
Well, in the academy, we need to, just cut to the chase and say, look, you're signing up for a career that is going to expose you to very traumatic events, and it's going to bring up emotions for you. And then we can list, the heavy hitters. If you attend a child death, that's probably one of the worst. There's going to be homicides, there's going to be suicides, there are going to be gruesome automobile accidents. You're going to walk in, there's going to be domestic situations where someone is really beat up, and clearly there's a bad dynamic here that's been ongoing. So, they have to be aware that they're going to be exposed to that, and that it's not even a matter of like if you're going to need help or you're going to need therapy, but when you're going to need help or you're going to need therapy. And, to definitely become familiar with your peer support team once you get to your agency, after you go through, your initial training and whatnot, ask about it if they haven't, introduced the concept to you that there's a peer support team. But every department should also have like a list of vetted therapists. And so that's one reason why we wrote this book, Helping the Helpers, is, to train more people this looks kind of fuzzy. Let me do this. Helping the Helpers, the clinician's guide to first responder mental wellness. Okay. What it takes to become a clinician that works with these populations. And so you can't just be a regular therapist and think that you're going to sit across from a police officer and be able to earn their trust. That is your first hurdle right there. They can see through you. They know if you're bullshitting or pretending that you know what they're talking about. They're going to just see right through that, and that'll be your last session. So we wrote this book because we felt that it was like a major gaping hole in clinicians' guides. And there definitely needs to be something like this. So we're very proud that it came out last year. It is a reflection of a compilation of many of our podcast interviews that we did. And I think it came out really good. So first and foremost, we need more clinicians that are trained to work with these populations. Yes, it should start in the academy of just giving people the heads up that you are going to be exposed to stuff that's going to rock your world, and you're going to lay awake at night some nights. It's just going to happen. And so if you think that because you're young and it's like the guys with 15, 20 years, that those are the ones that have been worn down and their bucket is full. No, because you're going to see things for the first time. And before you get used to like what it's like to go to a car accident, you're going to have your first gruesome car accident. And that's probably going to sear itself on your mind. And so, realizing that that's going to take a toll, like on you, on your sleep, also on your relationships. It's going to affect how you relate to your significant others. If you end up having children, it's going to, you're going to be super concerned about bad things happening to your kids.
Well,
Paramedics, really are on top of their kids to wear the helmet and whatnot. Now your kid is feeling like he's the only one that has to wear the helmet in the neighborhood because my father or my mother is a damn paramedic. This is going to affect all your relationships. So,
well, you said so many good points. I was writing them all down as fast
all
as I
right.
could because I loved your points. The thing that I appreciate the most is, yeah, we need more vetted therapists to do
Yeah.
the job. I'm going to throw out something that's happened to me recently about a vetted therapist. And I mean, I say that in very light mood. And if that person recognizes themselves, I didn't share your name. They told me that they were an expert because their uncle was in a firefighter.
Oh,
I said, "Oh, how often did you see your uncle?" "Oh, I'd see him, major holidays." I don't know how that vets you to be a first
right.
responder. And
Right.
that person was extremely, extremely, extremely upset about my
Upset
statement.
about your judgment, but there's a lot of truth to that, Steve. And not only was I raised by a Marine and a police officer, I was told by now a very good friend of mine, deputy chief, retired from a local fire department. He's like, you got to go to Citizen Police Academy. Their department is having a Citizen Police Academy. It's 17 weeks, and they're going to go through everything that police have to learn. And it's at your level, right? We even did firearms. We were on the range. Like we learned about SWAT, we learned about law, and just it was eye-opening, right? So, and then when I was invited to become clinical supervisor of that department's peer support team, I rode with every member of that peer support team, even at midnight, because there was somebody who was on mids. And there was somebody who was a detective. So I spent a couple of hours with that detective up in the DB, and he showed me a redacted warrant. Many, many, many pages. You think, oh yeah, you just get a warrant. No, that detective has to work on that for hours, sometimes days, in order for it to be worded so that the judge says, yes, you can serve it. So, like,
After it goes through the hands of the DA, by the way.
and it's just policing is so much more than what you as a civilian or what I as a civilian, even as a daughter of a cop, ever realized. So ride-alongs, do ride-alongs, ask questions. And then I did the same thing for fire. So that
Mhm.
deputy chief had me ride with him, being first on scene to fires, in his vehicle. And then the engines show up and he stages them. He tells them what to do. I mean, I learned so much. I had dinner with the firefighters, and I listened to their conversation, which was very interesting. And, you end up seeing the difference between fire culture and police culture, and how, they get to hang out with each other and talk about bad calls in the fire department, but in the police department, they go from suicide, and now they've got, complaint because a neighbor says that the neighbor's dog is pooping in their yard, right? And so, going from one horrible thing to something that just seems so petty, and having to switch gears, right? And watching a police officer go through that, and they ride alone in the town or the city
That's
that I
exactly what I
went.
was
They
going.
ride alone. And so they go from one shitty call, and then they're alone, and they're going to this, what seems to be, why are you so upset over this when I just came from, a woman who she came home and found her husband had killed himself, and having to make that mental adjustment. Right. And so even EMS, there's someone is driving the ambulance and the other person is in the back with the patient. Right. And then after the call, as they're restocking the ambulance, perhaps cleaning out if there were any bodily fluids, they can talk about that call, right? And there's a beginning of a processing. Police are in a whole different, it's a whole different way of them having to deal with trauma.
I think that that's exactly what I was going to share, because exactly being alone is a whole different ball game than, in Massachusetts, you end up with at least a team of 3 or 4 when one officer and, paramedic or EMT or firefighter or some combo of 4. And that makes a huge difference because you can process. Sometimes you don't have time to process because you're on.
No, not in the city that I help. They're on to the next call. They don't have time to stand around and process it.
But even with ambulances, you might have a few in a row, but you still have the same experience, so you can talk about it.
Correct. As you're driving, you could process the last call, or as you're cleaning, because at some point you have to restock the ambulance and clean it out because it has to be HIPAA compliant.
Right. And I think that that's what I mean is that police go from one call to another. And the one thing I will never forget, and this is because of my experience also doing the therapy with them, do not forget about your civilian dispatch or even your sworn in dispatch.
Correct.
They go from one call to another. And again, I think about that Chicago call. I've talked about it on the podcast before, about knowing that you got your officers on scene, and you hear tuk, 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 and then the phone clicks off, and then 5 seconds later, 911, what's your emergency? And you need to do that as a dispatcher. You don't have time to go, you know what, I'm going to go process that outside of here. So I tell people, like, the dispatchers, which civilian or not, in Massachusetts, there's a little mix, mostly civilian.
Okay.
Your dispatchers typically also grow through hell.
Oh,
And
absolutely. They don't have closure necessarily because of HIPAA, right? They may want to know how did that baby choking at 4 month SIDS baby, like how did that go? Because oftentimes they have families themselves, and they may not ever find out what happened, what was the outcome. The other thing is they're sitting, right? And so they can't move around much. They might be able to get up and go to the bathroom, and the other dispatcher can cover the phone, but all of that is going into their headphones, right? And then it's like rippling through their body, and they're sitting. And one thing that is a fact is that the rate of obesity among dispatchers is very high. I think a lot of them will eat in order to self-soothe because they can't move around and get that energy out,
it's not like you can go for a jog afterwards.
No. Or even between calls, you're already like jacked up from one call, and now it's stirring inside your body, and now you have to answer the 911 call phone again. And then there's a lot of stupid calls.
Right. And
like
the dog
geese,
issue.
The Canadian geese have pooped all over my lawn. I want someone to do something about it. Well, guess what? That's not a 911 call, but the dispatchers have to deal with that,
Yeah, stupid Canadians. Don't worry, I'm Canadian. I can say that. But I think the other part too is realizing that when you talk about the changes that needs to be done, not only training in the front end, I think that the one that people, and I'm sure you talk about it also in helping the helpers. I really feel that we need to get the people who are in the leadership role to start thinking about it. Because, some of the guys would go like, oh, I survived 20 years. Why can't this guy take it? Because he's different. Well, why can't she take it? She's a woman. No, it has nothing to do with being a woman or man. Some people have different responses.
How about this? How about the number of officers that retire early or that end up with really bad alcohol problems and or take their own lives? Isn't that enough to kind of justify that perhaps we need to have admin supporting wellness initiatives? Hello?
And I think that that's why I say getting the chiefs and the leadership to buy
Absolutely.
into it is so important.
Right. You can't have officers afraid of using your resources because they're afraid that they're going to be judged or deemed deficient or a liability.
And I think it goes back to a little bit of what you talked about, vetted therapists and people being, able to handle that. And what I mean by that is I've had a few people, I'm not a doctor like you, Stacey, but sometimes people are like, can you just check on this guy? Is he going to be okay? And most of the time I can make a judgment call. Obviously, if they need a psychiatrist or psychologist, more than happy to do that. But I've had many, like at least 2 chiefs call me like, are you sure? I'm like, well, okay, why do you ask that? They're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so let me explain to you something from a civilian perspective. If I thought this guy was dangerous in the community or this gal, understand that I live in the community. I have kids in the community. I have friends in the community.
Right.
Do you think for one
Yeah.
iota of a second I'd fucking put their lives in danger with some guy or some gal I don't think that should get back in? Wake the
Right.
fuck up, chief.
Yeah.
There's also this doubt that comes from sometimes leadership because not all leadership, I get that. But there's a doubt that comes like, well, are you sure? Well, then don't fucking send them to me. And why are you asking me that? Maybe you have your doubts. That's great. I cleared them. You decide what you fucking do with that. Just a quick break. Guys, I'm going to talk about a new product that I really like. I actually bought one of their hoodies. It was amazing, and I really enjoyed wearing it. This episode is going to be supported by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned activewear and leisure brand. And one thing that I genuinely like about them is that they support different causes. I actually gave a few people I know who work with first responders or nonprofits their name to Deemed Fit, and I know they're talking to them. They do a lot of initiatives and collections that are based on mental health for first responders. And if you go there right now and you buy anything, including the mental health support stuff, use the code RDA15. That's right, RDA15 to get 15% off on any products that you get. Again, it's called RDA15. Go to deemedfit.com, DEEMEDFIT.com, and enjoy 15% off at checkout to save. Now, right back to the episode.
Right. But we're talking about human behavior too. We don't have a crystal ball.
You don't?
We have our list of like things that we can check off with regard to suicidality or homicidality, but something could happen between now and when they go home that sets them off, and now they want to follow through with killing themselves, or they want to go and punch, the guy who's sleeping with their wife out.
Right.
Like I can't control everything that they're going to come across between, now and the next session that I have with them. I can say, call me if something comes up. I want to know about it before you do anything rash, right? But I can't control that person.
And I think that I also talk about situational stuff. And what I mean by that is this. I worked parole for many years, and I used to do in Massachusetts, murder 2 is no intent to kill originally, but you did kill someone.
Yeah.
Type of thing. It's not quite manslaughter, but kind of. And I would work with those guys. And one of the things I would always explain to some people, like, aren't you scared? Because I'm a therapist. I should be scared, right? And I'm like, no. I'm like, why not? I said, because if you hear the circumstances, you understand that based on circumstances, sometimes, what happens. And we can't judge what's going to happen in 10 minutes, never mind 2 hours, 3 hours.
Right.
You go home and you're happy and life is good. And then you catch your wife with, that's getting beaten up severely by some other man. You pick up, or woman, it could be a woman, and then you beat the living crap out of them to the point where they stop breathing.
Yes.
Are you responsible for what you did? Well, you kind of did it out of passion, but yeah, you did kill someone. But they're not dangerous. That was circumstantial. And when I used to write these reports for parole and probation, I would always write, as of right now, we're doing the interview at 12:02 today, client is safe.
Correct.
And then after that, people will be like, I can't predict the future. If my wand's upstairs, it's not down here. I can't get my wand right now. But if you can predict human behavior 15 minutes down the road, you're a better human behavior.
And I understand chiefs want to know, is this officer safe? But like as of 12:03 now, in this conversation, he checks all the boxes for safety.
And I think that that's what the other part too with some of the therapists, I feel sometimes it's explaining to them that you're talking about moment to moment.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes some therapists are like, no, they were stable last week. Like, I was stable 5 minutes ago. I might be unstable now. It doesn't mean anything.
Right. And especially if there's substances involved, because that can change on a dime.
Substance behavioral addiction. I think that we underestimate how much gambling, sex addiction is playing a huge factor ever since they made DraftKings. And I'm not picking on DraftKings.
Absolutely. Right.
DraftKings, including FanDuel, and I'm not going to go through all the companies. There's something about it. Like I shared this story before on here, but it's worth saying. When the person is betting on soccer at 9 a.m., because that's when they start in England, and then they're betting on ping pong from South Korea at 3 o'clock in the morning. And this is a very true story.
Yes,
And
that's
they
an
lose
addiction.
$2,500 in that
Right.
time.
Yeah.
Behavior will change. And
Yes.
that's not something I can predict.
Correct. Correct. And interestingly enough, we just lost he resigned as chief from a city department in Connecticut because it was found that he used over $80,000 worth of the department's money to pay off his gambling debt. So once that was discovered, he stepped down and they needed a new chief. So it is a problem. And it's not just line officers. We're talking chiefs here. So it's a big deal. So can I talk, Steve, a little bit about, the second part of this book, Dump the Bucket? One is we've already covered it in the previous interview about how EMDR is like the most effective tool to use with police. But the other agenda is that I've always known
Wait a
from
minute. Before you
time.
go on, you asked me permission. I'm saying no. What are we going to? No, I'm kidding.
Look, we could talk about
No, I want to hear this. This is
the
important.
Strait of Hormuz if you want.
Oh, no, hell no. I'm not talking
All
about
right. All right. There's any number of topics that we could talk about, but
that. I just figured I'd put in the joke anyway.
yeah, that's fine. No, I'll roll with that. But I got concerned because, we have all this money going into wellness initiatives, right? Making sure you have a peer support team, making sure that you have education for all officers, line officers, all the way up supervisors, even command staff about wellness, right? And the importance of wellness. And what do we mean by wellness? And there's a lot of money. There's a lot going into that right now. But I have always kind of suspected that there is a subset of police that will not use it. Okay. And that is what my research showed, right? So there are particular items on the ACEs questionnaire, Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire. There's only 10 items, but there were 3 that were significant that loaded onto avoidant tendencies and mistrustful tendencies. So you could have a stellar peer support team that people are raving about. You could have command staff that is cheering for wellness, right? Come on, folks. We've got all these wellness programs. We want you to take it. We've got a list of therapists that have been vetted, and we have chaplains, and we have couples therapists, and we have financial counselors, and it's all on the website. Just, it's there. You can go and look at it anonymously, and you could pick a therapist, or you could talk to peer support, and they're not going to come and report to us. So use it, right? And then there's going to be that subset. And there's a direct correlation that beyond the shadow of a doubt, right? Because you have to use a statistical analysis, regression analysis, in order to say this is not due to chance, all right? So of the 177 officers that I gave a survey to, and they answered the ACEs questionnaire and they filled out a adult attachment scale, there are 3 items on the ACEs questionnaire where if they answered it yes, they were most likely going to say, I have problems, but I'm going to deal with them by myself. And that proved what I had suspected. And those are the ones that have a bucket half full already coming into policing. And if they went into the military and they were in combat, now it's 2/3 full. And now they're going to do police work. All right. So that bucket is going to overflow pretty early compared to somebody who had a splendid childhood. So the items that are most significant are as follows. And it doesn't mean if you said yes to this, that's it, you're screwed and you're never going to go for help. I'm just showing a correlation. There was a tendency, if you said yes to this, you're probably going to bypass peer support. And hell no, you're not going to see a therapist, all right?
We're just going to clear up for the audience in case they don't know. Correlation does not equate causation, but in the majority of the cases, it can be linked. So
yes,
there's a huge difference. When I mean correlation is that these 2 things are linked. This is what we think it is, but there is no guarantee that's it. So sorry for the
that's fine. And that needs to be said.
The researcher in me that went to a research school needs to say that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that because that's true. So with that caveat, Did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Mark yes if your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other. So that one has the most correlation with being mistrustful and not wanting to get help, like pushing other people, saying, yeah, that's good for other people, but I don't need that. And what that says is if you didn't feel like your parents were there or your guardians were there for you to support you, it is very unlikely that you're going to look at your peer support team or some unknown therapist that, yes, has been vetted perhaps by your department, but you don't know this person. So if your own parents let you down, you're just automatically assuming that the chaplain and the therapist, counselor, whoever,
The
they're also
peer,
going to
the
let you
leadership,
down.
everyone.
So here's another one. So not as strong, but very strong. Did a parent or adult in your home ever physically hurt you, resulting in bruises or cuts on your skin? Right? That would be physical abuse. All right. And then the other one that is also correlated with mistrust and not going to a therapist, but not as strong as the one I just read or the first one. Did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? If you answer yes to that. So that's the trifecta.
Right.
And there were a number of officers of the 177 that answered all three yes. It is very unlikely that those officers are going to seek help. And I'm worried about those officers. I have not proven, and my research is not going to go down that avenue of, are those the ones that take their lives because, or drink themselves to death or, retire early or whatever? I don't know, but I would suspect that they probably are the ones. Because if you look at the suicide research, the number one cause, or again, not cause, but what has been endorsed in psychological autopsies, and this is usually the family and the friends answering yes, he or she reported that. Interpersonal difficulties, so they're really not getting along with their significant other, right? And so
Right.
somebody who comes from a childhood where they didn't feel cared for by their parents or guardians, they're likely going to have a difficult time relating to their significant other,
Right.
right? And if there was physical abuse and verbal abuse, well, people are not your go-to when you're having a hard time. Alcohol's probably your go-to, prescription medication, maybe working out, not, sleep is going to be an issue. And also these people they endorsed one true and false item that says, I have trouble calming down once I get angry.
Right. I remember that area, and it's so important to talk about those things because you're not going to trust a human being, and there's a reason for that. And the vetting stuff about therapists, telling a first responder of any kind, to me anyway, say, don't worry, trust me, is a great way to be distrusted for the rest of the
Now
session.
it's earned. Trust is earned. These individuals tend to be closer to animals. Like they'll have a beloved dog that they go home to and they cuddle with, and they feel closer to the dog than they do their significant other or their kids.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, as we come up on time, Stacey, this went by really fast. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Went too
For hours.
fast. We still got to set up karaoke. So
Yeah, I'm not. I'm going. You tell me where it is. We'll figure it out. We'll meet in Rhode Island. That way, we're on neutral
in
side.
Rhode Island. All right, we could meet in Rhode Island. I'll introduce you to my dad, and then you'll have compassion for me.
I have an off interview story about that for you. Not about your dad. I don't know your dad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Something else that's similar to what you just talked about, which I think you'll relate to. But how about my audience wants to relate to you? So where do we find, Dump the Bucket? Where do we find Helping the Helpers?
Both books are on Amazon. Easy to find them. My website is drstaceyraymond.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Just type my name in, I come up. I'm on Instagram too, and Facebook, but I don't do a whole lot with those, but I'm trying to be, up to date socially, but
Yeah, I try to do the same, but
yeah, I'm trying.
But no, I think that, this is for my audience. I didn't read the Helping the Helpers, but I'm assuming I'm going to get the signature from you.
You want that? I could send it your way.
Yeah. And
I
if
could
the
send that
ambulance
because
driver
that's worth reading, you know?
I want to read it because this is a great idea to help the helpers.
Yeah,
And that
we
the
need more
therapist.
therapists like you and me to help these people that are, in the line of fire, they're risking their lives helping civilians, and there aren't enough therapists that know how to sit with them.
You forgot one thing to mention. What's the podcast?
The podcast is Responder Resilience. And so you can find all of our episodes at respondertv.com.
All right. So I wanted people to go to that. We're going to do karaoke in Rhode Island. For my audience, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this because I did enjoy it. I hope you go get Stacey's book on Amazon. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing all of you in the next episode.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.